Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now in 3.26 we'll be getting a new challenge league, the Mercenaries of Trathus, which is pretty much exactly as you'd expect, mercenaries that you can find in the world and enlist their help to your cause. You can bring them along with you on your journey and they'll fight alongside you against enemies. This is going to bring some incredible buildcraft to the table for patch 3.26, and I expect many of the crazy builds we'll see this league will be making interesting use of a mercenary to do something that you usually wouldn't be able to do, or perhaps something that would be very difficult normally to achieve. Now, whilst mercenaries do have their own preset skill builds for their specific archetypes, which can also include some special skills and support gems, as was shown off in the trailer, the most important part is that you can give them your own gear pieces to wear, which means you can potentially make use of powerful modifiers on items without using those items yourself. It's very similar in that sense to Animate Guardian, but for AG to work you need to invest into it, including gem sockets and passive skills. But for mercenaries, the only real investment is time spent finding the right one and gold spent on recruiting them and reviving them. And unlike AG, mercenaries can equip jewellery items that you give them, rings, amulets and belts, which can provide a lot of power. So this video is going to be all about some of the very powerful items you can make use of on your mercenaries in 3.26. And this will be part 1, covering armour items specifically. That's helmets, gloves, boots, body armours and shields. And then tomorrow I'll be making part 2 for weapons and jewellery items. Now, before we get into it, one thing to mention here is that I think it's very unlikely that you'll be able to provide your mercenaries with new skills granted by items. So I don't expect to be able to, for example, have my mercenary wear Doryani's Delusion to gain and provide a purity aura. If you can do that, there's going to be a lot more broken stuff going on. But you can't do that with Animate Guardian, and I think the idea of predetermined archetypes in terms of the builds that those mercenaries are running directly goes against being able to do that here as well. So I think it's likely that skills, triggered skills, and auras from items are all off the table in regards to items you give your merc. However, I do believe that you'll be able to utilise curse on hit items, but you may need to provide your merc with an extra curse in that case. Anyway, let's get straight into it, beginning with Algor Mortis. These gloves make enemies in your chilling areas take increased damage from lightning damage. Now, we don't know how many different archetypes of mercenary there are, but we do know at least one of them, that was shown in the trailer, has abilities that create chilling areas. Krail the Depraved uses Arctic Armour, Frostblink and Frost Shield, all of which create chill ground or chilling areas that would work with these gloves. Krail also has a mercenary-only skill, Earthquake of Winter, which may also make a chilling area. So, as a lightning damage build, you can utilise this unique on your mercenary to gain a decent damage boost, which will be especially useful for single targets like bosses or essences. Additionally, you can potentially give your mercenary lightning damage via their weapon, or slots that provide added damage such as rings and amulets, to enable them to inflict sap, which is further benefit from these gloves, making enemies deal less damage. Next up we have the Crown of the Tyrant, which again has several benefits, but unlike the previous item, this one doesn't require a specific mercenary to work. It simply provides benefits to allies, in this case that's your character. You can colour the socket to choose which type of added damage you want, and this helmet also makes enemies near your mercenary have minus 10% to all resistances, which includes chaos resistance too. So if you can benefit from that added damage, or the minor resistances, or hopefully both, then you can make great use of this helmet on your merc. Moving on, Leer Cast is there for a general damage boost to your character. The previous helmet, Crown of the Tyrant, that is going to be very, very expensive in 3.26 trade leagues, as it will be more sought after than it usually is in an average league, and it only drops from the All boss in Delve. But Leer Cast provides a likely weaker but much cheaper option for a damage boost from the Mercs helmet slot, and it's just a generic increased damage aura, good for pretty much every single build. Then we have Doryani's Prototype. Now this is an interesting item. Nearby enemies have lightning resistance equal to yours. Now, because mercenaries can use jewellery, you can make use of rings and amulets that have been modified with a reflecting mist, making them provide negative lightning resistance instead of positive. This means that you could potentially get your Merc to the minus 200% lightning resistance cap on Doryani's prototype, which sets nearby enemy lightning resistance to that value. And this also potentially frees up your curse slot and the need to fit exposure into your build, so you can make use of something like punishment instead. Now obviously, it must be mentioned here that your Merc is going to be quite vulnerable with this kind of setup. Even if you can get a decent amount of armour on them, they will take a lot of damage from lightning damage over time, such as from a Mana Siphoner rare. You could consider giving them Maruzotul's Machination, which is a unique shield that grants a bunch of keystones, one of them being Divine Flesh, so that half of the lightning damage that they take is taken as chaos damage instead. That could certainly improve their defenses against lightning damage if they have capped chaos resistance. Next up, Mutewind Pennant and Redblade Banner, two shield options to improve a mercenary's warcry skills and the buffs that they provide to you. We know that some mercenaries will have warcry skills. We saw at least one of them in the trailer using Enduring Cry. By default, warcries provide their buffs to the user and their nearby allies, and some of these buffs are very good. Take the example from the trailer, Enduring Cry, which provides a life regeneration buff, and it grants endurance charges to nearby allies based on the power of nearby enemies. Redblade Banner will guarantee a strong buff without the need to ensure the Merc is close to enemies, whilst also granting a large amount of warcry CDR so they can use the warcry skills more often, resulting in a higher buff uptime on you. Meanwhile, for Mutewind Pennant, this shield excels if you can already guarantee a lot of power to scale the warcry buff, such as during a boss fight against a unique boss, as this one further scales the buff with warcry buff effect, but it also grants the Call to Arms keystone to your Merc, and this keystone prevents the warcry from providing charges or its buff to the Merc, but makes the warcry buff last twice as long on you. Okay, what about a more defensive setup? Expedition's End is a unique body armor that provides a chilling aura for a base 10% action speed slow on nearby enemies. This can also be scaled by modifiers to ailment effects if you can fit any items with those modifiers into other slots on your Merc. This one may be useful to place on a frontline mercenary while you deal damage from range against slower enemies. But on top of the chilling aura, this unique will also potentially allow your Merc to freeze enemies regardless of which type of damage they're dealing, for even more defense for yourself. Do keep in mind though that you will need to provide them with some chance to freeze from another piece of gear. Alright, take a look at this. During the reveal they showcased another mercenary, Alak the Fraudster, and this Merc uses Aspect of the Spider. Now, this aspect skill is already incredibly powerful as it periodically applies webs to nearby enemies, making them slower, and also making them take increased damage from all sources, including your character. So this mercenary alone is going to be really good paired with most builds. However, you can improve Aspect of the Spider quite a bit with the bestiary exclusive unique items that drop from Venomous, such as the body armor, which makes enemies affected by your spiderwebs deal 10% reduced damage, making the aspect skill have a good defensive boost, but it also makes enemies affected by spiderwebs have minus 10% to all resistances for even more damage, and it provides a huge area of effect increase for the skill too, making its effects more reliable. There's also the boots, for an extra web debuff stack too, so you can really double down on that skill. Keep in mind that the other aspect skills are likely to exist on different mercenaries too, so look out for Aspect of the Avian, which can be used with Sakawul's Nest to double the bonus it provides and grant those bonuses to your character as well. Okay, what about Legacy of Fury? This is an AG favourite and now it's going to be a Merc favourite. These apply Scorched to nearby enemies, lowering all of their elemental resistances by at least 13%, but up to 15% depending on the Scorch effect roll. So that's really good to boost your damage output, but there's also the chance to cause a burn effect on killing Scorched enemies, which is really nice for clear. But will you be securing most of the kills instead of your Merc? In that case, you could equip your Merc with Gravebind. These gloves grant kill credit to your mercenary, allowing them to benefit from on-kill effects such as the aforementioned burn effect on the Legacy of Fury boots, but there's a lot of options like that, for example Impulsor for explode against shocked enemies. Spore Guard is there too. There are quite a lot of these on-kill effects that you can utilise. And of course, as I've seen many people mentioning already, you can of course just use your Merc as a magic finder with Gravebind and a bunch of rarity gear, but I think they're likely to fall over a lot if you do that. There's also Asenath's Gentle Touch for explode that doesn't require the Merc to actually get the kill credit. They also have built-in Curse on Hit for Temporal Chains, which is potentially very strong depending on your build. But be aware that if your Merc already uses a curse, you will need to provide them with an extra curse from gear. Now there's also Victario's Charity and its replica version for some aura effect and charge generation. That's going to be useful on many builds and lots of different types of mercenaries. Then there's the Windscream unique boots for an extra curse, useful if you find a Merc with a good curse for your build and you also want to equip a curse on hit item on them too. Then you can turn them into a curse bot. The Blood Price helmet can be used to make nearby monsters reserve some of their life, so you need to deal less total damage to kill them. And there's also the Garb of the Ephemeral, but assuming attribute requirements are a thing on Mercs, you may not be able to get enough attributes to equip this one on them, or it will take a lot of attribute heavy gear slot investment. But if you can use it, it will provide the powerful bonus of preventing your action speed from dropping below base value, whilst also preventing nearby enemies from dealing critical strikes. Now unique items are great, but don't forget about normal modifiers on crafted items. Here's a list of things I could think of. On helmets you can use influenced suffix modifiers for Shaper or Elder to make nearby enemies take increased physical or elemental damage. There's also similar modifiers which instead lower resistances on nearby enemies from the Conqueror influences. On gloves you can use Hunter prefixes or Eldritch implicits for chance to intimidate or unnerve, making those targets take increased attack or spell damage. There's also Culling Strike available as a Warlord influence suffix on gloves, and on Eldritch implicits you can also access exposure modifiers. And remember that any gloves you use can be corrupted for curse on hit modifiers, which should work with mercenaries. Boots are great for various ground effects. For example, you can use an Eldritch implicit for brittle ground on your frontline Merc, making it easier for you to scale your own critical strikes. Boots also have other Eldritch implicits for specific Warcry cooldown recovery rate. For body armors, the Redeemer influence has a prefix that provides a blind aura, whilst you could also just use Eater and Exarch influences to provide a boost to the aura effect of any auras that your Merc is using. There's also Warcry buff effect as well on Eldritch implicits for body armors. Now because there's so many options and possibilities, I'm sure I've missed some from this video. So do put your own ideas in the comments below and I'll try to make a list in the pinned comment for any that I've missed. And remember that this was just the armor items. Tomorrow I'll be covering the potential weapons and jewelry that you can use on your mercenaries in 3.26, so stick around for that. And that's it for this one. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.